Alright, what's poppin'? With the release of the final shape, I've noticed there are a lot more new players, and I don't see this talked about ever, but I think it's time to talk about which raid you should be doing in order as a new player. Now, I will say, because every raid was recently scaled to the same level, it does not matter what raid you actually start with. However, there are easier raids and there are harder raids, clearly. And for new players, I always recommend doing an easier raid. I don't care what your blueberry friend is saying. You know, he got you on the game and now he wants to get you to be in their Salvation's Edge and fucking Last Wish team. Let's pump the brakes a little bit. Let's have Timothy run through at least one or two easy raids before we give him a big task. Now, if you're wondering where I'm coming from and my experience with the game, I do have a lot of hours on Destiny 2. Just real quick, you didn't see that, by the way. Just real quick, if we're talking about hours here, I have 2,603 hours on PC. I believe I had close to 4,000 hours on Xbox. I could be incorrect about that. I don't really remember too well. But just know I've played this game a fuck ton over the years. You can see here, these are some of these raids right here. I'm going to preface, I have 67 clears here, 57, and 4 fuck Spire of Stars. These raids are no longer in the game, they don't matter, but I cleared these a lot, I played these a lot. A little bit of the newer raids came out. I didn't even attempt Pantheon. Pantheon's a waste of time for any new players, just prefacing that now. But I do have a lot of time in Last Wish. You can see I have 7 days here in Last Wish. That's playtime in the raid alone in Last Wish. So, and then we have Garden, Deepstone. I've cleared every raid at least 20 plus times. Crota's End, maybe not so much. Root of Nightmare, same thing. But I have recency experience with it. And then Salvation's Edge, yes, I don't have a clear. You can make fun of me in the comments. This is week 2, I want to say. However, you can see my playtime here, 28 hours, and last night I think, yeah, this 3-hour session was the final boss. So I am fully experienced, I'm fully aware of every mechanic in every single raid. I've done every single raid. I'm also not one of those people that just gets the final boss and then clears the final boss and gets a nice little clear to my account. Normally, I'm doing full runs, that's why you'll see some of these red marks here. But yeah, if you're a new player and you don't know what the site is called, it is called Raid Report. This is a great way to find out if players have clears on raids, what their experience are with raids, how many total raids they have cleared, everything like that. So if you are looking to fact check your teammate who says he has 50 clears and, Crota's End or whatever, you can definitely use Raid Report and call him out for that. Anyways, moving on. I would also really like to preface this. I don't think it's talked about a lot, and I know for a new player in Destiny 2, you're always kind of just running activities. It's not great. I'll be honest, the new player experience, it's terrible. One of the worst by far. It's not even close. But I know you guys are probably just running activities like strikes and nightfalls. Raids are not strikes or nightfalls, as memey as some of them can be. None of them are as easy as a nightfall. It's not even close. You will have to do mechanics, unless you get extremely lucky with your team and you're set on ad clear. I personally always recommend new players to do a easy mechanic for at least 1 or 2 of the encounters. This is just to get them more experience, and so they're not just brain dead running through the same activity, just clearing ads, because that's not always fun. Now, I want to say that if you're a new player before doing any raid, whether you follow my order I'm going to give you here or not, I highly, highly, highly recommend, I cannot recommend enough, looking up the video of how to do the raid before doing it. Now, if you're a player who enjoys figuring out things on their own, and, going through your first experience completely blind, that's completely fine. There are raid groups for you, you just need to make sure you're clicking on the raid groups that say first time and not, have experience or whatever the post is. But I highly recommend looking up Dado Does Destiny. He's a great YouTuber for any sort of guides on a raid. Same thing with Fallout Plays. Fallout Plays is really, really good. Rick Cactus used to be good, but I'm just going to be honest. He just explains the same thing 3 times in 3 different ways, confusing everyone, especially with his recent raid guide on Salvation's Edge. Highly don't recommend Rick Cactus, but you're welcome to watch whoever you want, and you're welcome to do whatever strategies you want, as long as you're looking up a video before you're joining a group. Unless, again, you want to go through completely blind. Now, I also want to say that you need to be able to accept when you can't do a roll. Now, I'm not calling you stupid, but there are going to be situations where you are doing an encounter, more specifically in the harder raids, where you do not fully understand what is going on, and your brain is not comprehending it. And you know what? That is perfectly fine. But if we're sitting there wiping on the same encounter for 2, maybe 3 hours, and you're the only one fucking up, you need to be able to call out, hey, could we swap roles? I'm not doing well in this position. It happens. Everyone's been in that position before. It's not like a, you know, it'll hurt your ego for sure. But there are times where you might be stuck on an encounter and you're the only one fucking up and you're just not understanding the mechanic. Yes, there are times where you get unlucky. Maybe an ad spawns on you, kills you. Maybe the boss is always aggroed on you. Maybe the mechanic is fucking up or something. Bungie doesn't make perfect raids. It is what it is. But other than that, you do need to be able to say, hey guys, I've fucked this up like for an hour or whatever. Can anyone swap roles? And if they can't swap roles, that's your team's problem, not yours. Also, another important thing, do not ever go into a raid thinking you're going to ad clear the whole time. Now this goes for if you've done the raid 5 times, like let's say you did Vault of Glass, where is it? Vault of Glass 5 times, and you've ad cleared every single time. Don't expect this every single time. You will have to do mechanics at some point, and you will have to be able to learn to do the mechanics at some point. This is very, very important for all the raids. It's a good rule of thumb to just be willing to learn encounters. This isn't activities where you sit there with your brain off and do nothing the whole time. Some are, and if you're running a 5-man group or 6-man group, like, makes sense. Maybe they want you ad clearing the whole time. We all have that one guy in the group. It is what it is. But be willing to learn encounters. Please, I beg of you. This is not something where you can just, like, get a free clear. You know, just prefacing that. Because there are people, I know there's people who join raids thinking, oh, I'm just going to ad clear and everyone's going to do everything for me. Don't be that guy. And then, as always, I'm going to preface this again, and I just want to say that I am making this list more specified for new players. I'm going to break down the encounters. I'm going to break down which raids I think are best currently in the game. Now, you'll see on my raid report, I do have a shit ton of raids, but some of these aren't in the game anymore. I think Pantheon's out of the game. Crown of Sorrow, like, basically all these ones are gone. But I will be ranking all the current ones in the game. Now, to start off, I think every new player should start off with the raid Vault of Glass. Now, I know if you're an experienced player, you're probably thinking, but it's a boring raid, but it's a long raid. Listen, I'm there with you, but that's only because we've been playing this raid for 10 years, okay? New players, this is a completely new experience to them. So, for a breakdown of Vault of Glass, for the rewards, I want to get into the rewards first, and then I'll get into the encounters. But the rewards are fairly decent, even in today's metas. You get a couple nice weapons here. More specifically, Vex Mythoclast is the exotic you get. It's a very good fusion rifle that acts as a primary weapon, so you're able to basically use a budget cut version of a linear fusion rifle, but as a primary. Very good. And then you have Found Verdict, which is a good shotgun, and then you have Corrective Measure. Good LMG, there's not many Void LMGs, pretty good. Hazen Vengeance can get some good rolls. Fatebringer is typically what you're looking for, though, because Fatebringer is one of the better hand cannons, rolling with some really nice things. But overall, not too bad rewards. This raid's arsenal is basically to get you to the next raid. You're not really going to be wanting to run all these weapons on the current raids, or the harder raids, I should say, just because most of these can't roll anything crazy, but they're good, they're solid. And then obviously the armor looks very nice. I think it's just showing the Titan here for some reason, but I assure you, yeah, better list here. Yeah, these weapons here. Does it not show the other class's armor? Ooh, oh, here we go. So yeah, you can see the Titan here, pretty cool. More specifically the Mark. And then you have the Hunter here. This one's probably the worst one. Helmet's pretty cool though. Would be decent for transmogs. And then you have the Warlock. Warlock's not too bad because of the cloak, in my opinion, or the whatever it's called. I think it's not a cloak. I can't remember. The dress that Warlocks wear. I don't give a fuck. But yeah, and then you can also get ships and shaders and ghosts in the raid as well. But you're more or less looking for the gear and the experience, depending if it's, you know, pinnacle or whatever. But yeah, so Vault of Glass definitely is what I recommend. To break down Vault of Glass, now this isn't going to be a guide for the encounter, but I'm going to explain to you why I think a new player is better off doing Vault of Glass as their first raid. I truly believe that Vault of Glass is the best new player experience. First of all, at the beginning of the raid, it's not technically encounter, but I will call it the first encounter, I guess. There are 3 plates that you need to charge, and this is a good thing for new players to get a hand of. It does take a while to charge, but you're going to understand that you need to split into groups, and then the groups defend a plate, and then they stand on the plate, and then the plate charges a door. A lot of encounters are going to be go here, stand here, or it's going to be you're with him, he's with him, and Timmy's with Bob. You know what I mean? You're going to be splitting into groups, and you're going to be standing on plates quite frequently in raids, and you can do it in this very first area without dying, without causing wipes. There's no way to fail this. I think it's just a good idea. It warms them up for what's about to come. Now, the second encounter is very easy. It's essentially the first one, but you can actually wipe. There's going to be 3 confluxes, and you're going to be standing near the conflux to just defend it. Make sure no Vex sacrifice at the conflux. If you don't understand what that means because you are a new player, just know there is an object, I need to defend that object and not let anything touch that object. Big things will spawn, champions will spawn, which is another good reason why I recommend this raid as the first one. Because there are champions, you are going to get first-hand experience with what it's like fighting champions and high-level activities. Most new players, I predict they wouldn't really deal with champions unless they did Legend campaign, maybe. Even if they don't, it's a good way to just get get warmed up for the rest of the raids, because most raids nowadays have champions, at least the recent ones. So it's a good idea to get your hands or your feet wet with the champions in the second encounter. Now the third encounter is going to be slightly harder, but this is going to be a good check for mechanics. Essentially what happens is that there's going to be a oracle that spawns, and the oracle that spawns is going to make a ding, and there's going to be up to 7 of them. I'm not going to go through the whole encounter here. It is kind of long, but effectively, you and a few team members. Now, there's 2 ways of doing it. Typically, nowadays, people will have one person solo it and everyone else be ad clear. But if this is your first time and you're doing it with the boys, or you're a solo player, and you're LFGing, you're most likely going to do the strat where everyone gets 1 oracle, and your job is going to be to listen to a ding, which this is good practice for later encounters or later raids where you're going to need to listen for audio cues. Audio cues are by far the most underrated mechanic. I don't know what to call it. Mechanic ignition, mechanic startup or something. The thing that starts a thing is normally done by an audio cue. And you always want to be aware of an audio cue, because it is simple. You don't need to listen for a call out, you just listen for that audio cue. For this third encounter, it's going to be the dings of the oracles. So once you've gone and done that encounter, the next encounter is going to be your first actual damage test. Now this is a good way for new players to get their hands on damage items. Now if you're, Timothy and you're running around with a blue rocket launcher, this is where you're going to find out, hey, maybe I might need something a little better than a blue rocket launcher. And this is where videos come in to help, because typically in a video they'll recommend certain weapons to use. Depending on metas and stuff, it shifts, but for the most part, whatever is said in the video is typically going to be okay for the current raid. But it is, when you're DPSing Templar, it is just going to be someone doing a mechanic, and then everyone else is doing damage. And I always recommend for damage, with any boss that has a crit, linear fusions are good, but you'll most likely be running something like rockets, just to preface. And this is a good way to sort of understand how damage works. Boss has shield, boss loses shield, now we damage because someone said damage. Pretty simple, but it's a good way to just get your brain sort of locked in when it comes to damage phase. Then we have a jumping puzzle, or it's not technically a jumping puzzle, but I guess we can call it this section of a jumping puzzle, the Gorgon Maze, where this is unique to Vault of Glass. You'll find most raids have a unique thing about them. Vault of Glass is the Gorgon Maze. You're going to be walking through an area, trying not to get spotted by harpies, essentially, which are called Gorgons. That's why it's the Gorgon Maze. But this is a good way just to get your team all under the same sort of umbrella. And what I mean by that is that some people have different strategies of doing this, and some people might not be fully understanding what's going on. This is a good time for everyone to really understand the raid, to really understand mechanics and stuff like that, and really pick a leader. Someone you're following during the Gorgon Maze is always going to be better than just everyone running around like a chicken with their head cut off. Also, secret chest, good idea, just to get experience with how secret chests are. Now, moving on to, what would this be? This would be the 5th encounter, I want to say. This is a long raid. I believe it's called the Gatekeeper encounter. I could be wrong, but I believe it's called the Gatekeeper encounter. This is effectively what you've been doing for the first couple encounters, which is another good thing for new players to understand. Typically in a raid, the first 1 or 2 encounters are going to carry over to the final or second final encounter, just as like a test, basically, to see if you've been paying attention. The 5th encounter for this is quite simple. You're going to have a few people basically standing on plates like you did previously, but this time there's going to be just more shit to do. There's going to be different planets involved that you have to go to. There's going to be different ads that spawn that you have to deal with. And at the end, when the mechanic is finished, everything basically shuts down and everyone groups up in the middle. They kill the wyverns, wyverns die, and now you've completed the 5th encounter and you're on your first actual raid boss. Now, this raid boss, Athian, I believe it's pronounced. Thank you, Bungie. We could have just had Atheon, but I guess it has to be Athian now. It's actually a pretty good boss. Now, this is where I think it gets very interesting for new players, and I think this is where a lot of people are going to wipe as a new player, and that's completely fine. When it comes to bosses like this, where there's RNG involved, basically random people get teleported, they're going to be doing a mechanic, while people on the other side have to do a different mechanic. This is a common reoccurring theme in most Destiny raids, where, hey, RNG, there's a team of people that get sent somewhere, and then, hey, RNG, there's a team that has to get them out of that place. This happens in almost every raid, but I do think Vault of Glass, as a whole, after doing all those mechanics and everything, is the perfect beginner raid for all the reasons I just listed. And they're very good at teaching the player, hey, you know, you're gonna have to defend plates, you're gonna have to do mechanics at some point, you're gonna have to pick up slack if someone isn't able to do it. Hey, you're gonna need DPS weapons, so make sure you have a linear maybe for yourself. But if a linear's not working, maybe try a rocket and someone's running Gallahorn, stuff like that. It's just a good idea to get your feet wet with this raid. Again, just want to say, you don't have to do it in this order, but I do think it would be beneficial if you do, just from my thousands of hours of experience. But hey, what do I know? The next raid I believe every new player should go to after completing your first Vault of Glass is Deepstone Crypt. Now, some people refer to this raid as the easiest raid. What do I think? Do I think this is the easiest raid? I think this is the easiest raid. Yeah. I'd probably agree. It's probably the easiest raid now that I think about it. And the reason why I'm saying to do this one after is because this one, while it is easier, the mechanics are a little bit more, not complex, but it's more of a active thing you have to be aware about and not something other people can do, if that makes sense. But effectively, these are the loot. Now, these are the red borders you can get as well. Some of these are really good. I personally like Trustee as a scout rifle. Getting reconstruction on this thing is fucking amazing. Succession, really good. Heritage, DPS, really good. Eyes of Tomorrow is the exotic. Not a great rocket launcher. It's had its up and downs, but it's not great overall. You're mainly going to want the loot here. It's pretty good. Armor, also, fucking magnifique. It's amazing. Bequest. Yeah. Show me the fucking... Here we go. Titan armor. I know the helmet looks stupid, but the rest of this... Oh my god, it looks so fucking good. Anyways, former Titan main, by the way. Then we have the Hunter. I actually don't have this set yet. I gotta get this set. It's pretty decent. Not bad. And then the Warlock. Warlock, I think, actually looks the best just because the robes are nice and techno. But the reason why I think this is great for new players after you've completed Vault of Glass is this is a shorter, more refined version of Vault of Glass, in my opinion. Or sorry, shorter, more refined version of a raid, in my opinion. This is where... this is where you're mostly going to have half the team add to the whole raid and half the team do mechanics, but it can get a little messy, and I'll explain why. The first part of the raid is a sparrow or no, it's not a... You can use a sparrow, but it's not a sparrow section. Until... Oh, no, you do get to the sparrow section. Right, sorry. I'm taking a trip down memory lane while I'm explaining this. But... the first section is going to be a sparrow section where you're basically going to be getting a stack of debuffs, and if you get too much of that stack, you die. This is a good lesson for future encounters. You'll find out, as I get there. But it's a good test. You can also die here and not wipe. It's just going to send you back to the beginning if you're unlucky. But you pretty much get on a sparrow, you pick someone to follow. And if you're not following someone, you're basically following the red light, and you just keep on going until you make it to the end, kill a big enemy, and then wait for your whole team. This is another thing where it's just like, it's good lessons for a new player to get, where it's too much of this thing will kill me. Hey, I need to be paying attention to the players in front of me, or the people who know more than me, either or. But yeah, then moving on to the first encounter. Very simple, very basic. Once you get a few few encounters under your belt, I guess. But the first encounter is pretty simple. You're gonna have 3 people basically clearing ads. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, one of them is gonna be alone in their room, and then 2 of them are gonna be able to handle their side decently. This raid also has champions, so you'll need to be aware of that. But, for the most part... Oh, no. No. Sorry, I'm wrong. You're gonna have 2 people clearing ads on each side. There's going to be a light and a dark side, and there's going to be one person basically doing the mechanic, which is introduced the operator buff, which is you kill something, they drop a color person, you pick up that colored person, and now you are that colored person, effectively. And you're going to do whatever your role is specified. So there's going to be an operator, there's going to be a scanner, and this is a good way for people to understand that mechanics are going on, but I also need to pay attention for when it's my turn, effectively. So basically one side's going to be doing operator, they're going to get sent down, and they're going to be doing the mechanic. Scanner's going to be calling out the right ones for operator. This is a good way for, like, teams to get ready to make callouts. In Vault of Glass, there are callouts to be made, but in this raid, callouts are pretty much everything, because for most of these encounters, it's going to be one person calling out one big thing happening, and everyone's just going to be, like, going to that thing or paying attention to what that thing is, sort of thing, you know? But first encounter is two people basically, you know, swapping spit, and they're just, like, helping each other out to find out the information to get the encounter done. And then the buff is going to get transferred, and then the person underground is just going to be conversating with the new above person, and they're going to be working out which ones to do and which ones not to do. This one is also very easy to fail just by shooting the wrong one if there's a wrong callout given. So it's also a good idea to get with the times, because most LFG groups are going to have it one way, and most clans who run this shit every fucking weekend or whatever, they're going to have it a different way. There's a lot of different ways you can kind of do the first encounter by callouts and stuff, but for the most part, there's going to be one common way as an LFG group, as a solo player. You're going to figure it out. After the first encounter is completed, again, very, very simple, very easy. Second encounter starts up. Now, the second encounter up until this point will be the hardest encounter of any encounter you've done as a new player, if you're following my list. This is because Atrax is a bastard. And what I mean by that is, if you are doing the cheese, where you are all getting your damage supers, and, you know, this is where you're bringing a new player to the fucking tippy top of what they can do as a new player. I'm talking fat Nova Bombs. I'm talking, oh, you don't have Parasite? Well, it looks like you're using Lament. Oh, you don't have Lament? Well, it looks like you're using fucking Cry Mutiny. You know what I mean? Like, this is where you're really stretching what you can do with a new player. Most new players, I'm going to recommend to do this Atrax second Deepstone Crypt encounter legit. And what I mean by that is that there's a common cheese where it's everyone DPS's one guy at a specific time that's called out. This one's very simple. If you're a new player doing the cheese, very, very simple. You're going to follow whoever has a buff. They're going to call out, everyone group up. You're going to group up. He's going to call out which clone to shoot. And then you're just going to shoot that clone when he says it. Very, very simple. Very, very easy. You can only fuck this up by not listening. But if you're doing this normally, it is going to be a little harder. Now, if you're doing mechanics, it is definitely a lot more juggly. You have to juggle your buff with giving it to someone else, and then they have to juggle it to give it to you. A lot of things can happen to fuck this up. It could even be as simple as, like, you forgot to transfer the buff, and now it's just a wipe. A lot of shit can go wrong during this, but just know that this is, in my opinion, the hardest encounter up until this point. Even harder than any encounter in Vault of Glass. IMO. Just my opinion. But I do think Atrax will give all new players a rough time. But this could also be your first experience with a rough time, where sometimes it's going to take you 2 or 3 hours to get through an encounter. This happens, okay? I don't want new players to get discouraged when they're stuck on an encounter for like 3, 4, 5, even 6 hours. It happens, alright? Whether it's your group, whether it's you fucking up, whether it's you just don't have a good loadout, a good build, a good super, good fragments, whatever it is, it will happen. Believe me, I've been there. Every new player has been there at some point. Holy fuck, this video's 30 minutes already? Jesus Christ. God damn, this is gonna be my longest video. But yeah, That's the second encounter. Third encounter, this is the part of the raid where you can sit back, kick up your feet, and just fucking, just let chaos be chaos. Now, you don't have to do this third encounter by chaos, but I always find it to be a nice relaxer for just everyone to do chaos. If you don't know what I mean by chaos, is that chaos is commonly referred to encounters that you start the encounter and everyone does whatever the fuck they want, as long as the mechanic is getting done. This can pretty much only happen during a few encounters, but this is one of them, where as long as 3 people, maybe even, you kind of want 4 people to know what to do, but as long as you vaguely understand what to do, this encounter should be no problem. You should breeze through it. It does have champions. Take care of the champions. You'll be chilling. The fourth and final encounter. Yes, this is the final encounter. So it is much, much shorter than VOG, being a total of what I count to be 6 encounters. Deepstone Crypt, having the 4th encounter boss. It's a fairly interesting boss. It's a cool idea. It's a good way to get players to understand that, like, crit spots might not always be in the best area, so sometimes it might just be better to use Galahorn rockets or learn the divinity, because most people do run divinity for this boss, and then you shoot Tannix's little testicle sack below his shank. But you'll learn a bunch of mechanics here, like this is again a reoccurring thing where you pick up a ball and you're gonna get radiation. Too much radiation kills you, similar to the very first Sparrow section where too much frostbite kills you. Same thing here. Good muscle memory to remember, oh, I need to pay attention to my debuff stacks, basically. And then again, great damage check. Doesn't have the most health in the world. I don't remember if you can do this infinitely if you fail. I think you only get 4 tries. Like with Athian, I believe Athian is also only 4 tries. I could be wrong on that. It's been a long time since I've ever gotten enraged on Panic, so I can't quite remember. But for the most part, fairly simple. And this is again one of those encounters where 3 people are doing one thing and then the other 3 people are doing individually something different. Common occurrence on raids. But yeah, that's the Deepstone Crypt. I do believe it is going to be your best bet to do this second. There are just more complex, like basically, in my opinion, the buffs and debuffs that you have to pay attention to are a little bit more complex than the ones in Vault of Glass. Vault of Glass, there's basically one debuff, and that debuff is you have to get cleansed. As far as I'm remembering, that's pretty much it. Deepstone, there's going to be multiple buffs that people will have to get and do rolls. Then rolls might get switched up, so you have to switch up the rolls. And then people have to pay attention to their debuffs, otherwise shit goes wrong. So I think on an individual standpoint, Deepstone Crypt is harder. And I think as a group standpoint, I think Vault of Glass is pretty fucking easy, to be honest. But that's my personal ranking. I definitely rank Deepstone Crypt just slightly harder than Vault of Glass, even though Vault of Glass is longer. Now, moving on to the third raid I think you should be doing. This one might get a little controversial. In a way, I'm kind of ranking these easiest to hardest as well. I think that's pretty obvious. So if you disagree with my list, feel free to comment down below. I'm a stupid poopy head, but that's up to you. So the third raid, this one might be a little controversial. I think Root of Nightmares is a good third raid for new players. Now, some people consider this raid to be the easiest raid. I would not disagree with you. However, I would say, in my personal opinion, I think this raid, our Deepstone, is easier, only because this raid is easier to fuck up, and I'll get into why. But, to just start, holy fuck, World's First was 2.5 hours? Oh my, yo, Bungie, what are we doing? Anyways, yeah, so these are the weapons. Weapons really, these weapons are fucking goated tier. This is one of the best raids for weapons. The Slug Shotgun, very good. Again, you can craft all of these very, very good. Strand grenade launcher, very good for when there's a strand modifier now on raids. Fantastic. The trace rifles, also very good. I think there's a better solar one out now. Briar's Contempt, really, really good. The fucking sidearm, goated, and the exotic is absolutely goated for endgame activities. Conditioned finality. Yeah, there's not much to say other than everything is just, like, fucking... It's either really good or amazing in this raid, like, by far. Armor, I'm gonna be honest, I think the armor is mid. I think it's a cool idea. I just think the issue with the armor is that they just don't synergize well. Wait, you're not gonna... Oh, they don't have them. Motherfucker. They don't synergize well. You can kind of see them here. I can't click on it or anything. But on the left, you'll see the Warlock. It's a cool chest piece, but it doesn't really work with anything. Titan as well, very, very cool. Arms are the biggest downside, which suck, because Titan arms are typically goated. And then the Hunter, everything looks pretty good except for the cloak. Personal opinion, I think the cloak, it just looks like fucking stupid. But the reason why I believe you should do, I almost said condition finality. Why I think you should do Root of Nightmares 3rd as your raid is because it is fairly simple, but this is a good way to get actual permanent raid gear that you might be running for the rest of your time in Destiny, while also, if you have experience with Vault of Glass and Deepstone Crypt, this is going to be a new element that you haven't experienced yet, combining different buffs, since the other encounters haven't had that previously. But once you've completed this raid, you will pretty much have tasted every single type of mechanic Destiny throws at you. And just to start, very beginning, there's a way you can get a secret chest, which is this is a little thing that you can start doing at the beginning of your runs for Root of Nightmare. This is the thing with newer raids, where you can kind of spawn a secret chest that spawns a deep sight guaranteed weapon, which is just good for red borders and stuff like that. The first encounter is by far one of the easiest first encounters of all time. Basically, one person does a mechanic and 5 people kill a tormentor. That's pretty much it, to be honest with you. There are scions that spawn that you have to run in and punch. So I guess that teaches you, hey, there's bubble scions. I think they show up in more than just this raid. I could be wrong though. But yeah, you kill a tormentor, that extends the timer, and yeah, this is a good idea. This raid, I think, introduces the extending of timers. If you've been following the list so far, I don't think there's a way to extend timers in the previous raids. Yeah, I think this first encounter is the first time you're going to see an extension of timer, which is going to be a common thing in current raids. First encounter, brain dead easy, kill ads, let whoever wants to do the mechanic do the mechanic. It's a cool mechanic, but it is just like brain dead easy. After that, you'll go through a jumping area, you'll get a chest, a secret chest, move on to the second encounter. Second encounter, this one is a little complicated explanation-wise, so I recommend looking up the video, of course. But fundamentally, you're going to have runners, there's no DPS, so this is a good idea to test out add clear weapons now that you've gotten some more experience. Maybe you've gotten, your commemoration, or, you want to try out your trustee, or maybe you want to try out Vex Mythoclast if you got lucky, or maybe you had a good void build and you want to run your corrective measure. This is the time to be using it. There are also champions in the second encounter. So, there's champions in the first encounter as well, but, like, they're just, they get wiped so easily, like, I don't even think you really need to be paying attention, personally. But, there's champions throughout, I think, every encounter, except for third, I want to say. This is a very short raid, I want to preface, and that's typically why it's considered one of the easiest. But the second encounter you're going to be doing is essentially just running. If you are a runner, you're going to be going side to side, doing basically what was the first mechanic, or the first encounter mechanic in the second encounter. And yeah, you're gonna have 2 runners instead of 1 this time. And you're gonna have ad clears. And you're gonna experience the jump pads, which are one of the worst design mechanics in Destiny, personal opinion. Uh, this has caused many wipes because the jump pad just didn't send people up, or it's caused people to fly into the ground, or it's caused people to fly too far up, so they die to fall damage. Yeah, this is the first time you're probably going to experience bullshit Bungie mechanics. It happens. Yeah. The third encounter is going to be... Oh, I should probably preface, before getting to the third encounter, there's going to be a jumping puzzle that you'll have to do with part of the mechanics from the first and second encounter. In a way, it's kind of like a modified version, but it's a good idea to get familiarized with this jumping mechanic thing, just so that you understand how the rest of the mechanics are going to work, or I should say just how the fourth encounter works, because effectively you're going to be doing what you're doing there, just in the fourth encounter. The third encounter is planetarium. Most people just call it planets. It is actually fairly simple, but this is where it's simple if everyone does their job, but if you're too focused on helping other people, you're gonna end up fucking up. So for this encounter, it is very much about a time thing, and very much about a communicating with your teammate thing. There are ad clear roles, just like with most of this raid. There's going to be ad clear roles, but there's going to be 4 people doing mechanics, and you're going to be swapping planets. It's basically... It's like one of those like kid games, basically. There's going to be all black on one side and 2 whites, and then there's going to be all white on one side and 2 blacks. And you basically want the blacks to swap with the whites. That's a pretty simplified version to explain it, I guess. But once you've done that, it'll be damage, and this is probably the first encounter... No, I guess that's not true. It's not the first encounter that you have to pay attention during damage, but you will have to pay attention during this damage phase on the third encounter for Ron, just because you don't want to stand on the wrong plate, otherwise you won't do damage, and I think it burns a plate, and that's bad for damage. This is a good way for players to just understand, like, fuck-ups matter. Even if it's an easy raid, fuck-ups do matter, and that they will cause wipes if, you know, the raid gets a little too sloppy. You know, you at least have to have one eye open during this raid. But, moving on to the fourth and final encounter of Root of Nightmares, by far one of the easiest bosses. The hard part about this is clearing ads, to be honest with you. A lot of people are a little scared, I think, and they don't want to push up closer to where Nezarec is, the boss, and clear the ads there. A lot of people want to stay in the spawn area. The reason why I'm putting Root of Nightmares so high up here, and it's not like the first raid I think you should do, at least as far as lore goes and everything, none of these raids so far matter. You can play these in any order, to be honest with you. But I think Root of Nightmares kind of requires at least some sort of setup. If you're coming fresh into Destiny and you haven't done Vault of Glass or Deepstone or any raids, I'm just assuming you haven't done any raids and you're following my list. At this point in Root of Nightmares, you're going to have commemoration for ad clear. You're going to have prosperity or trustee for ad clear. You're going to have succession or heritage for DPS. You're going to have raid gear so that you can upgrade. You're going to have something like Haze and Vengeance, a really good rocket launcher. You're going to have Fatebringer, a really good primary. And this is, you know, like, one of the seasons is going to be Overload Hand Cannon. One of the seasons is going to be fucking, you know, fucking Barrier Scout or Unstoppable Scout. Shit like that. You're going to have an arsenal by the time you've done this. And while these are the 3 easiest raids, and you can do them in any order, if you've done it to this point, I think Root of Nightmares is the most demanding for loadout. Vault of Glass, you can get away with blues. It's just pretty simple. Deepstone Crypt, you can get away with blues, to be honest with you, other than a few DPS parts, but those are more reliant on supers than it is gear, to be honest. But Root of Nightmares, this is where you're going to actually need gear. And this is why I rate this higher than the previous raids in terms of difficulty. You're going to at least need good ad clear for the 3rd encounter. Good ad clear for the 4th encounter, because there's, you know, fucking big boys that spawn that need to die. So you'll need, like, a decent fusion rifle or a decent sniper rifle or something. You're going to need to get gaze from, Homeboy, and to get gaze, you're going to want a sniper in this final encounter. You're going to want a good rocket launcher, Haze and Vengeance, you know what I mean? So that's my thought process on why I'm putting Root of Nightmares at 3. You can kind of like switch around and do whatever you want. Maybe Root of Nightmare like looks cooler to you and you want to do it first. Hey, go do it first. I don't care. This is just my recommendation. But yeah, I do think Root of Nightmares is a good raid overall. I just think this is the most new player friendly raid we've gotten recently, and we'll get into why soon. But as far as raids go, I do think Root of Nightmare overall is going to be your 3rd raid, just because of the requirement of a loadout. Now, moving on to the 4th raid I think you should be doing. And this is where I think a lot of people, this is where it gets a little messy with raid difficulty. And in my personal opinion, I think the 4th, would this be the 4th hardest? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5th hardest, 4th easiest raid in Destiny 2 currently. Crota's End. Now, I need to say this right now. If you've played Destiny 1 and you've not played Destiny 2, or you haven't attempted this raid, if you have completed Crota before, it does not matter. This raid is completely fucking different than what Crota was in D1. There's nothing the same of this raid at all. The layout might be similar. I guarantee, unless you've done fucking Crota's End within the last year, whatever experience you had in Destiny 1 does not matter. So, please drop the ego, look up a video, understand the mechanics, understand you're going to need to learn a new raid, alright? Just to start off with the weapons, ooh, they don't even have, but yeah, weapons here, again, very good. Red borders, very, very good. Song of Iryu, it's one of the only arc LMGs I think you can craft. The other one I think is just garbage. Oversoul Edict, pretty good pulse rifle. Abyssal Defiant, you see this in PvP a little bit more, I think, now. Word of Crota, really good Void Hand Cannon. There's not a lot of good Void Hand Cannons. Word of Crota is a really good Void Hand Cannon. Idon's Ally, that's a meme. Swordbreaker, good Strand Shotgun. I think this is one of the first primary shotguns you'll get, if you've been following this list so far. And Fang of Iryu, good Scout Rifle. The exotic is Necrochasm, which has an interesting way of sort of getting Catalyst and stuff like that. But if you've already done the Catalyst and shit in Vaulted Glass, Crota's End is kind of like a level up from that. Or it might be a level down, depending how you see it. Anyways. Getting into the gear. Where are the gear? You're gonna tell me there's gear, right? You're gonna show me gear, right? You're not gonna show me the armor. Oh. Yikes. Well, that sucks. That kind of blows. Doesn't show armor. Oh well, this is a good idea of what the armor looked like. This does have really nice armor, so if you want to do Crota's End just for the armor, I don't blame you. Armor's nice. Weapons are okay. But start the encounter starts with charging a plate. And does it? I think it starts with the chalice, if I'm not mistaken. Chalice is a new thing to this raid. This is the core mechanic of every single encounter in this raid, so pay attention to it immediately. If you do not hold a chalice, just watch other people holding chalice, listen to the callouts, try to understand what they're doing. The first encounter has a secret chest. Probably get your secret chest first, if you've already completed the raid. If not, you'll just get a mod, so probably wait till you do an encounter, then get the secret chest. But the first encounter is basically, you're going to be running with your group, you're going to be playing hot potato with the chalice. You're going to be getting a new buff called Enlightenment. You're going to enlighten things to extend timers. You're going to bank Chalice to extend timers. And you're basically just following the group. That's pretty much it. Sounds very simple. This is one of the encounters where it sounds very simple. You're going to wipe. You will wipe. If you do this first try, you're just a Giga Chad. I don't know what else to say. LFG players, we know this first encounter sucks absolute cock for LFG players. People want to sit there dead silent. People don't want to make callouts. People want to think everyone else is doing Chalice and not them. It's fucking annoying. The amount of people that eager edge me into holes, holy shit, I would obliterate a goddamn continent if I could. Just kidding. I don't want to get fucking sued or anything. But in-game, I would blow up a continent in-game. But yeah, Crota's End first encounter, fairly simple. You learn the Chalice buff. It's a reoccurring thing throughout every encounter. And you'll have to deal with champions. And this deals with a time sort of thing. Where you have to extend timer, blah, 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 right? Also, you're gated on your progression because you have to bank Chalice in order to progress. I do believe so far, if you're following this raid list, this is by far the hardest first encounter that you will experience. You're guaranteed to wipe at this. Personal opinion. Actually, I think objectively, this is probably the hardest because Root of Nightmares is brain dead. The first encounter, 3 people need to know what's up. Pretty much, and that's it. And then Vault of Glass is not even, like, you can't even wipe. So this is by far the hardest first encounter because everyone needs to be paying attention to everything. Even if you're not ever touching the Chalice, you need to be paying attention that you're not falling in holes and you're not falling too far behind. But yeah. Second encounter is Bridge. I don't remember the specific name, but it's basically another game of hot potato. This raid I enjoy probably one of the most, even though I have one of my lower clears, I think, right? It's 15. I swear I've done this more. Do I have a lot of red marks, that's why? No. That's weird. I feel like I've done this way more. Maybe it's just because I did a shit ton in D1, so I'm just, like, it's ingrained in my brain. But, I do think the second encounter is pretty well designed. If you can get past the second encounter, I believe that you'll get past every other encounter as long as you have a damage weapon. But this is second encounter, pretty good for kind of seeing what your team wants to do. There is a specific guide to do the second encounter, but this is where it gets kind of fun, and you can kind of like plan out how you want to do this. If you want to give the Chalice, if you want one person with the Chalice to run around to everyone and give it to them, or if you want to play hot potato between teammates similar to like the first encounter. It's up to you. It's kind of fun. The third encounter is the first time you're going to be doing DPS. This is probably the first time I will recommend Divinity, even if it gets nerfed into the ground, just because it spawns a crit bubble, and it is very hard to hit a wizard in their crit unless the div bubble's on them. Now, if you're not running Divinity, rockets also work, but this is the first time you'll be doing damage in this raid. Typically, you'll just have one person run around looking for the correct callouts to make. I'm going to try to shorten some of these encounters because I realize I've been rambling on a little bit too much, but you're going to want, like, to set into groups, and then, you know, you have ad clear people, and then you have people paying attention to mechanics. And this is where it can kind of go, like, oh, someone forgot to kill the wizard, or, you know, a mechanic can go wrong during this third encounter, and it causes, like, oh, hey, Timothy, I know you've been sitting in that corner with your thumb up your ass, but I need you to actually do something now. So, be warned, if you're stuck on ad clear for most of this encounter, you might actually have to be doing rolls. So this is also the first time where I'm going to recommend every single person in the group to pay attention. Now, I know I'm saying, hey, be willing to learn, hey, pay attention to callouts, blah, 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 blah. But as a new player, you need to be paying attention to what everyone doing the mechanic is doing, because they might one day walk up to you and be like, hey, I need you to grab Chalice. So just pay attention for that. The boss damage is by far the easiest of any boss damage. and I say this only because you just need a sword. It could be a blue sword, it could be a legendary sword, it could be Lament, it doesn't fucking matter, any sword works. And yeah, you just pretty much use sword on Crota when Crota's down from everyone doing mechanics. Typically it's the same people from the 4th encounter, but it can get a little messy again, because things can go wrong. And you can kind of do this raid like the way you want. The first encounter, you can have everyone hold Chalice, or just a few people, and you can have someone go clear ads, so that no more ad spawns. The second encounter, you can kind of pick if you want everyone to hot potato, do whatever you want there. The third encounter, you can sort of pick if you want to do multiple phases, or at least plan for multiple phases, and get people who normally don't do mechanics to do a mechanic. And then the fourth and final, and holy shit, there's only 4 encounters. The fourth and final encounter being Crota. You can kind of just do whatever mechanic you really want. Like, if you want to do only one person gets sword, you can do that. If you want to do 2 people get sword, which is like the most reliable and most common way on LFG, you can do that. If you want to do 3 people get sword because you feel unsafe, because Timothy is missing his sword super somehow every time, hey, you can do that as well. There's no wrong answers in this raid, it's just different ways of doing it. It makes it kind of hard for LFG, but it makes it pretty fun for, you know, new players in terms of if they have groups and shit like that. If you are an LFG, understand that it will take time to learn this raid. This is probably one of the more complex-ish raids. This is definitely where this raid is more, like, far more complex than the other 3 raids. It's not even close, that I've mentioned. Not even fucking close. So, moving on from Crota's End, effectively the reason why I put it at, I guess we can call this the medium difficulty, higher than the previous 3, is just because there's more mechanics going on, more people are going to have to do things, but it is also more flexible, so more people can do things if they want to do things, and you can kind of mix and match the way you want to do this raid. So I think it makes it a little bit more, makes it more fun, and it makes it a little bit more challenging if you really want to challenge yourself, you know, and maybe you want the person on bridge to do 3 swords or something wacky, you know. You can kind of mix and match with this raid. It's pretty fun. It's like a medium difficulty just because it has 2 damage phases, and the 2 damage phases are genuinely more difficult than like the other damage phases and the other raids. More specifically, Iryut, just because she's a floating wizard and she can be a bitch to just hit sometimes. But I'm sure everyone knows what my next one is going to be if you've done every raid in Destiny. As far as lore goes, I also think this is the way to do it. After you've killed Crota, it's only natural you go ahead and kill his father in the King's Fall. Probably my favorite raid of all time, even to this day. Just to get into weapons, the weapons, very, very good. Duma Chalkis, no one uses this. It's a very, very good Void scout rifle. The Adept version can roll, I think it's Firefly Explosive Payload just for fun, or no, it's Firefly Dragonfly or something weird like that. Very, very fun scout rifle. Smiter Marine, also underused. Smiter Marine, I think, is also one of the better pulses in Primary. It's also kinetic, so it charges both your prismatic things now that Prismatic's out. Quillam's Terminus, I think, if my memory serves right, it's the best stasis LMG in the game, just because of its fire rate. Touch of Malice recently got buffed, I believe. Touch of Malice is probably an S tier exotic, but this is almost a skill issue exotic where no one wants to run it because it is kind of hard to utilize properly, but it can be one of the best primary exotics in the game. The Finds of Yasmin, solid sniper rifle. Midas Reckoning, solid fusion rifle. And Xylo's Bane, a lot of people use Xylo's Bane as their solar hand cannon. You'll see Dado does Destiny and use it a lot. Personally, I think this hand cannon's dog shit. The reload speed fucking kills the hand cannon for me. I think personally it's like the worst crafted solar hand cannon you can make. But if you like it, you like it. That's just my personal opinion. Armor also fucking just goated. The armor is so good for this raid. It really sucks we didn't get the D1 reprised version. But Oh, oh, you can just see it here, bro. Sorry. Anyways, the hunter cloak, everything looks fucking amazing. Titans, obviously amazing. You'll see everyone run the fucking boots and the helmet as a Titan. It's just, you have to. Mark also sick with any hive build. The Warlock probably got the weakest, the shortest end of the stick, if you will. But it's not bad at the end of the day. And then, yeah, you get the Sparrow and the ship. Very, very much looks cool. But yeah, reason why I think King's Fall is up here above the rest of them is not just for lore. I am a lore guy, but not just for lore. The reason why I put King's Fall so high up here, in my personal opinion, I think it is the hard version of Vault of Glass. And the reason why I say that is because I think every single encounter in Crota's End is a harder version of Vault of Glass. And you have to do more damage phases. This raid has... Let me just make sure I'm saying this. Yeah. It has the second most bosses in all the raids that Bungie has released. Being... But no, it has the same amount. Yeah, it has the same... Oh, so it's tied with the most raid bosses in all the raids. There are 4 bosses in total, and there are 5 encounters. 5 encounters if you include the beginning 6. So that's why I kind of rank it as a harder version of Vault of Glass. First part is just split into groups. You do a mechanic similar to Vault of Glass, but it's just slightly harder because you actually have to run with things. There's a timer involved. No way to really wipe this, but yeah, it's just a harder version of Vault of Glass, pretty much. The first act, or I'll call it second encounter because I'm going in order here. Second encounter is totems. This is where you split into groups, and this is probably the best encounter at balancing what 3 different people are doing at every single time. So you typically will have one person standing on plate, and then you'll have another person getting ready to get a buff to go stand on the plate, and then you'll have another person getting ready for their buff to then go take the buff and then stand on the plate. And you're going to be basically swapping between the 3, kind of like a game of pot potato, over and over, making sure you bank whatever buffs you get while you are standing on the plate, making sure you bank that in the middle. But this is also one of the harder first encounters, just because of how easy it is to fuck it up. You can 2-man each side and have one person act clear. However, typical LFG groups go is that you'll have, 3 people on right, 3 people on left. Yeah. At this point, if you've done all these raids up until this point, you kind of get the idea of, okay, 3 people here, 3 people here. Okay, I do this, you do that, you do this, and then we'll rotate. You get that idea by this point if you've been following the raids. If you have nostalgia because you played D1 and you want to do King's Fall as your first raid, go right ahead. This raid is fucking phenomenal. But I do recommend doing these other ones first, just to get a better arsenal. Once you've completed totems, there are also champions. There's actually champions. Holy fuck. There's champions in every raid? There's champions in every raid except for the next one. Holy shit, I didn't even realize that. Anyways, yeah, so there's champions, deal with the champions. Second encounter starts, War Priest, sick-ass damage encounter. One of my favorite bosses of all time. I think the idea of you guys, this is going to be like the upgraded version of Vault of Glass once again, where this is the third encounter, I believe I'm saying. If I said second, I apologize. This is technically the third, if I'm counting the very first part as an encounter. This is the third encounter. War Priest is going to have 3 plates. Everyone splits into groups of 2. And you're going to have 1 ad clear, and you're going to have 1 person doing plate roll. This is where you can kind of mix and match as well. Typically, plate people will also do night, but sometimes ad clear people do night because plate people can't handle it. If you can't handle it, just a skill issue, little bro. No, I'm playing. It's okay. If you don't want to do night because, there's too much going on, that's fine. But this is good experience to understand how the DPS mechanic will work later on in the raid for daughters. But this this aura everyone has to stand in to do damage. You're not safe in this aura, so make sure you have a well or whatever it is. Most of these raid encounters, you're going to see posts like, need Warlock, need this, need that. You don't ever need a specific class. It is ideal to have, you know, 5 Hunters and a Titan, or 5 Hunters and a Warlock. The reason why people always put in these posts, need Warlock, is because they want to have a well, and they want to brain dead Ooga Booga inside the well. Technically speaking, you can have a Titan, no problem. They recently buffed the Void Bubble. You get an Overshield while being near the Void Bubble now. You also can use Banner for a Titan. It's forgotten about. Nobody fucking uses it. Banner is so good for damage. I know they recently nerfed it, but it is still very good. But yeah. Don't feel like you need to swap your class in any raid, ever. There are times maybe when your team is lacking something that you might want to swap classes, but no raid requires a specific class. Anyways, moving on. So War Priest, you're going to be doing damage. You're going to have to stand behind a totem after he does his Dazzling Gleam move, and then basically get 4 times to do it. It's just a really good first encounter to introduce to you, hey, everyone needs to be paying attention to callouts that are doing plates. Hey, everyone needs to pay attention to their knights, otherwise it's a wipe. Hey, everyone needs to be doing damage at specified locations, specified by whoever is leading the raid. Very good lessons for a first encounter. Third encounter. The fourth encounter is going to have a little bit of a jumping puzzle too, or a maze, I should say, up into Golgoroth. Once you're at Golgoroth has definitely one of the more interesting raids. To this point, you will have experienced a similar... This is what I mean by, like, King's Fall just being an upgraded Vault of Glass. Golgoroth is effectively the Athian portion, where during damage, someone's going to get a debuff, and you're going to have to run up to the boss or get away from everyone, otherwise it's a wipe. So it's just a good... These previous raids build up. I hope you guys understand what I mean by, like, you know, you do Vault of Glass to get good gear to do Deepstone. You do Deepstone to get good gear to do Root of Nightmares. And by the time you're on Root of Nightmares, you have, like, good gear from both of these raids, and you have solid understandings of basic mechanics. And then Root of Nightmares is a little bit more complex when it comes to the mechanic. And then you go to Crota's End, where it's even more complex than Root of Nightmares was, or the previous raids were. And there's just more shit to do, but you get more leniency. And now with King's Fall, there's a lot more bosses to be killing, but all the mechanics are similar to something you've already done. So during Golgoroth damage, you need to be watching for your debuff. Random player gets it, run up to him. You get 6 layers of damage, basically, or 6 attempts at damage per damage phase, and you have 2 people cycling a buff that effectively takes them out of the boss fight, but they're just making sure everyone else can do damage. Moving on, we have another jumping puzzle. Everyone knows them as the Dick Wall. You'll find out why. And then you have Daughters. Daughters is a great setup for Oryx. And if I was to ever give out Destiny a perfect raid, I'd probably put King's Fall as, like, number 1. Because Daughters perfectly sets up what Oryx is going to do, just Oryx has more shit to do. Again, please watch these guide videos. I am not here to give you a guide on the raid. I am here to break down why I think this raid is where I'm placing it. So, the one you do after Crota, or the one you do 5th, technically speaking. But doing Daughters, this is where you can kind of experiment with damage, whatever you think works best. Either rockets, linears, snipers, whatever the fuck you want to run. And yeah, this is where you kind of balance the RNG mechanic, which previously you've already dealt with an RNG mechanic being in Vault of Glass, where 3 people get sent. This time, 1 person gets a debuff, he needs to call out. Everyone needs to organize themselves based on that call out, pretty much. And yeah, that sets up the final encounter, which is one of the coolest final encounters in my opinion. You fight Big Daddy Oryx. with his 3 toes, and he will slam a plate, and you pretty much do what you did on the first encounter, just slightly different. And then you get to the part where you do damage. After a damage cycle, Oryx is gonna do his either 1v1 or suicide mode, I guess, or the bombing mode, I should say. And then you just avoid that. 1v1 mode's cool, adds a little bit of RNG and spice to the encounter. Overall, very fun raid. Overall, very long raid. Even if you're not spending a lot of time on the encounters, you're definitely spending a lot of time getting everyone to the next encounter because of the runs and everything like that. Dick walls, spaceships, everything like that. But yeah, overall, I think this is slightly harder than Crota. I think it's only harder than Crota because it's longer than Crota, I'll be honest, but I do think it's by far leagues harder than the rest of these other raids. Moving on to what some people consider the hardest raid in Destiny. The Last Wish. This raid is tied with King's Fall for having the most amount of boss encounters as well. Just to get into it, red border weapons again. Age-old bond, no one really uses it. The high-impact auto rifles are just kind of shit. Nation of the Beast, goated hand cannon. Techian Force, we can ignore that. Tyranny of Heaven, okay. Apex Predators, kind of what you're going for. 1000 Voices can be used, but it's not as good. Basically, people who say 1k... sorry. Basically, people who say 1k is good, it's not as good as they think it is. And the people who say it's garbage, it's not as garbage as you think it is. It's just lukewarm. It's not great, and it's not, like, bad. But it's never going to be, like, your number one option. Apex Predator is effectively your upgraded Haze and Vengeance. It's just better, especially crafted, where you can... Fuck, that was spoilers. You didn't see that. But effectively, Apex Predators is the upgraded version of Haze and Vengeance. Transfiguration, really good kinetic scout rifle. Supremacy, if you haven't got Defiance of Yasmin, or what is it called? Praedyth's Revenge? Or what is it called? Yeah, Praedyth's Revenge. If you haven't got those yet, this is a good time to get your kinetic primary sniper rifle. Shattering Bone, I still use Shattering Bone. I think it's one of the better scout rifle or pulse rifles in the game. The exotic is, yeah, 1k, I already went through it. Where is, please tell me you have armor. Yes. Armor is actually really, I can't click on them, that sucks. Armor is really, really cool. Personal opinion, I think the Titan, I think the themes look really nice. I think these are great armor sets to work with other armor sets. But yeah, to get into it, first encounter is Cali. I'm not gonna count the first door opening part because you just need all people there. But yeah, first encounter is Cali. This is, I highly, if you don't want to follow my list, I highly recommend never doing Last Wish as your first raid. By far the most complex, by far the most harsh on your errors. Making a mistake in an encounter can easily lead to a wipe on any of these encounters. Especially on LFG teams where once shit hits the fan, everyone just panics. But yeah. So, first encounter, very basic, plate standing until you get to the point where you have to be paying attention to doors opening. And the doors will open based on if everyone did everything right. This is where, you know, there are some rooms for error. So if someone didn't get their plate because they weren't paying attention, somebody can typically charge their plate before damage starts. But for the most part, doors will open. If you do not get in the correct door, you will wipe. Not wipe, you'll die, I should say. But this will take, no doubt, this first encounter, if you haven't done this raid before, will take you a couple tries. If you're solo player LFG and you're joining other solo LFGs, this will 1,000,000% take a couple tries. I'm not mentioning the cheese here because if you are joining a group that is doing the cheese, then you're not really doing this your first time. You're doing this with people who've done this before. Cheese is, I'd never recommend doing cheese except for the last encounter, and I'll get to why. But yeah, Last Wish, first encounter, pretty goated first encounter. Up until this point, I actually do think it's the first hardest encounter just because damage is required. This is again where you're going to be experimenting. Maybe you want to use sword, maybe you want to use grenade launcher, maybe you want to use linear because you have aimbot on, you know, golden gun, blade barrage, nova bomb. Like there's a lot of room that you can explore with this first encounter. Definitely, since it's been brought up in power, it feels a little bit stronger, but not too much. Second encounter is one of the hardest encounters for an LFG group in the entire game, in my personal opinion. This encounter is where 2 people are going to be running around clearing ads, and then 4 people are paying attention to everything. Yes, I know there's 3 plates. You stand on the plates, you shoot to your right. I understand that part, but there's going to be whoever is reading, whoever the 4th person is reading, they need to be aware of the people standing on plates, because we all know someone could get booped off, and then it's like, ow, it's a wipe. No, you just had someone else stand on the plate. Or he's not paying attention, he went to the wrong thing, whatever, time's ticking down, because whenever the prisms spawn, time goes by 3 times faster, whatever it is. You can stand on the plate instead, and just to get damage moving on. But this is a good, like, you know, burst damage, and then wait. Burst damage, and then mechanic. Now you're doing mechanic, ad clear people, be on your shit, because people doing mechanics really, if this is their first time doing the mechanic, they really need to be paying attention to that tic-tac-toe board. And if you are ad clearing, you just need to be on your shit when it comes to ad clear. It's not hard to do, but you need to be paying attention for ad clear here for sure. Then, oh, I'm so tired of this myth that standing on the middle fucking causes the ball to spin. If you're an LFG player, if you're a solo player, you go into these raids, you'll hear that all the time. Stand in the middle. If you stand in the middle, it causes the ball to flip, and then people fall off. And blah. No, it's whoever touches that plate first, or the fucking platform first, a timer starts, and then the ball will flip. The middle has fuck all to do with it. Believe me, I play tested it a million times. If you doubt me, you can just enjoy being wrong, I guess. You know, just have fun being wrong. That's on you, bro. Not my problem. Anyways. And then effectively, you just do the same thing again. Very reminiscent of Root of Nightmare's second encounter, where it's you do one thing, you kill one guy, but in Last Wish, it's just you're doing damage instead of killing the guy. And then it's you go up a platform. Well, in this encounter, it's the exact same thing. Kind of why I recommend doing Root of Nightmares before doing Last Wish, just because in a way, Last Wish is kind of the harder version of Root of Nightmares. But yeah, that's the second encounter. There's a little bit of leniency in how to do it. It is fairly complicated, so definitely look up the guide. If you're doing Last Wish blind, I pray for your soul. But yeah, I highly recommend looking up a guide for this. Third encounter is Golgoroth. No, Morgoth? Morgit? No. Margit's a fucking Elden Ring boss. Morgoth? Morgoth? Whatever his fucking name is. I don't remember. Basically Golgoroth, point 2. Honestly, the easiest encounter, he's gonna spawn balls, you pick up the balls, everyone eventually has 2 balls, and then you shoot his back, and then it's GG. Even on the new, updated version, it's a fairly easy encounter. Just where everything's scaled up. It's still pretty fucking brain dead easy. For the most part, you can run ad clear weapons and get away with it. But yeah, Vault, one of the more complex encounters, being the 4th encounter. Yeah, 4th encounter. Vault is where you're really gonna need to find, like, if you don't have a raid leader by this point in the raid, you're going to have a raid leader now. Because someone is going to be directing the different callouts you need to make. Again, this raid is very complicated. This video is already an hour and a half long, so I don't want to get too far into it. So I highly recommend looking up the guide. But definitely 1,000,000%, you need to watch a video for this vault to understand it. If you cannot comprehend it, that is okay. There are 3 rules for ad clear. Just make sure you're ad clearing. Now again, different ways to do this. Some people like getting trapped to kill the knight instantly. Some people like standing on the outside to make sure they can call out when a knight touches the plate. But yeah, Vault is very simple on... It's fairly simple on like a broad perspective. You just do the same thing 3 times, which by now you should be accustomed to. If you've done all these raids, just do the same thing a bunch of times, and then it's done. Now, we get to Riven, the 5th encounter, and I recommend... I'm just gonna be honest. I know I'm technically an elite player by like my raid clears and all this other shit. Just a refresher on my last wish clears here. Where is it? I have 54 clears. I've done it flawlessly. I have the title. I've done everything in this raid. I know everything in this raid. I've done it legit. I have... Wow, that's actually a lot less time than I thought. I thought I would have had way more time in the raid. But... just to get into the last wish, Riven, I recommend doing cheese. Reason why I recommend doing cheese is because, yes, it is easier than doing it normally. And yes, if you are a solo player, and if you are an LFG player, it is going to be to your best interest to learn the cheese. Cheese, so much easier. You get sent down, there's going to be a joining allies wall. You don't want to touch that wall until someone calls out a shadow. If there is a shadow, you guys stay in that room, wait for a Riven to show up. DPS. My team did it with the sword. I'm sure you can get away with still hunters. I'm sure you can get away with probably something to do with prismatic. I'm sure you can get away with crazy, wacky fucking builds. There are ways around this. Swords is typically like the easiest, most brain dead one to do. I don't think there's any problem doing swords here. And then yeah, there's the joining allies wall, and then you go to the other side, worst case scenario, whatever. That's literally like the rundown of the whole encounter, by the way, right there. That and then the jumping puzzle when you get past the big bar of health that Riven has. And then you will finally get to Riven's Heart, which is the 6th encounter, and technically speaking, if we're counting encounters as res token requirements, this raid is the only raid with 6 encounters. It's a little hard, but effectively, all you have to do is look in the bottom left. If your name gets called out, you pick up the ball. If your name isn't being called out, then you're basically running with the person. And if you get teleported, you pick up a ball. That's pretty much it. Especially as a new player, you just follow whoever's in front of you. If all of you are new, someone better have looked up a guide. That's all I gotta say. But yeah, that's effectively Last Wish. It sounds pretty short. I assure you, this is one of... Once you get this raid done probably 3 or 4 times, you'll definitely start running into people who have done this raid 100 times. So it'll just be a breeze. There's a lot of elitists who play this raid still. Whether it's for the loot or whatever. Pretty good. Getting on to what I believe to be the second hardest raid, and what I recommend you do second last, is none other than Vow of the Disciple. Now, if you're using process of elimination, you know what the last one is, but I'm just going to get into Vow anyways. Vow, by far, is the hardest one. Even if it is shorter than Last Wish, and maybe even shorter than King's Fall, it's harder than every raid, by far, up until this point. Weapons are actually pretty goated. Submission is pretty good for a kinetic SMG. Deliverance, S tier for a stasis fusion rifle. Again, all red borders. The pulse rifle, really good. Cataclysmic was king at some point, still is very good. Forbearance is goated as well. However, you can get it from Onslaught, so you don't really need to do this raid. This raid is also very optional. You never need to do this raid for anything unless you need Pinnacle, but I understand everyone wants Pinnacles every now and again. The gear is kind of mid, I'll be honest. Or the armor, I should say. Let me just scroll down. Yeah, here's the armor. Kind of mid. It's cool because it's animated, but it's kind of like okay. It doesn't really work well with other things. But yeah. The exotic being Collective Obligation, I think, right? Yeah. Really good pulse rifle. Kind of hard to understand from like a simple brain perspective, but it's good. It's just that no one really wants to use it because it requires too much building around, I guess is the better way to put it. First encounter for Vow, very simple. It's pretty much a It's pretty much just a different version of doing totems, to be honest with you, from King's Fall here. It's pretty much a different way of doing it, just with 3 teams instead of 2 teams. There's going to be symbols. Very good idea to understand the symbols. You can look at them ADS, or I think just looking at them, it should say on your radar what it's actually called. So like a symbol you'll look at with hands, it'll say give. Symbol you look at that looks like the witness will be witness. A symbol that looks like a ghost will be ghost. You get the idea. This is where callouts kind of matter. More of a, like, some people call it give, some people call it hands, some people call it, you know, grabbing or whatever. Some people have different callouts for the symbols, but yeah, it's not too bad. First encounter is definitely a nice refreshment if you've been doing some of these other raids. And yeah, everyone, it helps if everyone understands the mechanic, but this is another raid where a lot of people can just do ads and then everyone else just does everything else. Caretaker, the second encounter, is your first boss in the raid. The Caretaker himself, you'll actually have to have 2 people babysit, and I think this is the first time you'll have a babysitting team. Let me think real quick. Yeah, actually, I think this is the first time you have a babysitting team. Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, so Val, you'll have a babysitting team, which you'll just be watching the boss, making sure you're staying alive. You'll have an ad clear team, and then you'll have a glyph running team. The glyph running team, by far the hardest role, and everything else, pretty much up until this point, you'll understand the flow once you've watched the videos. You'll understand, okay, I need to stun the boss. Okay, I need to stand on this plate. Okay, I only stand on this plate when it glows. Okay, I only run this, you know, I move with my teammates. Okay, we're going up to the 2nd floor. You'll understand because of the previous things you've done and all these other raids. It'll feel very, very familiar in the 2nd encounter here. Same thing with the 1st encounter. 3rd encounter is a little unique. There's going to be 3 relics that spawn. And if you haven't... The reason why Vow's so high is honestly because of this 3rd encounter. Because of all the other relics you have to do. At some point, you'll have to use a prism. Which prism is from... Technically from Leviathan's... what is it called? Isn't it just the Leviathan? Am I stupid? Yeah, it is called just the Leviathan. Prism is from the Leviathan raid, which is no longer in the game, but it's also in the Last Wish. So Prism, Last Wish, you'll start to feel how to use it because it's the exact same as the way the Prism work in Last Wish. Then you have the relic from from Vault of Glass. Sorry, my brain is like, I need to get a fucking drink after this video. I wasn't expecting it to be this fucking long, I'll be honest. But yeah. Relic, you'll have to use the shield from Vault of Glass. And then, what's the other one? The other one's the Taken Shooty thing. You'll most likely have done this through public events or something. But Last Wish also has it if you don't have experience with it. You probably won't ever use it in Last Wish because it is tied to a mechanic that's kind of useless that nobody really uses. But they're all fairly simple to understand. Actually, I lied. You'll see this in the Morgith encounter when you're using the thing to cleanse people. So it's the exact same thing, but you'll be doing a lot more things. There is chaos for this exhibition encounter, the 3rd encounter, but for the most part, just take your time with Exhibition. Exhibition is just a lot about trial and error, learning the room layouts, learning where things spawn, learning where enemies spawn. It takes time. It is what it is. Especially for your first run. Don't feel bad if that takes you a while. The boss, the final boss, Rolk, I think is my favorite boss just because of the way the fight is. Rolk is effectively... the same people doing ad clear the whole time are going to be ad clearing during Rolk, and yeah, everyone else is just going to be doing mechanics. You do the mechanic part about the reading, about calling out. By this point in Destiny, if you've done all these raids, you kind of get the point by now, you know? I call out this thing, my teammate understands, he shoots his thing, then he calls out his thing, and then I understand what that thing is. Sounds complicated, but once you get, like, raids under your belt, you understand the mechanics. or you understand how Destiny's mechanics work. But yeah, that's Vow. Vow is by far the hardest of these, in my opinion, and I think Last Wish beats out everything before it as well. I think King's Fall is the harder one because it is longer. I think Crota's End is harder than all the easy raids like Root of Nightmares, Deepstone, and Vault, just because Crota's End has the idea of everyone kind of needs to know what's going on, otherwise it can get messy if something fucks up. But yeah. And the final raid that I think is the hardest one to do, and that I think should be your last raid, I definitely don't this should never ever be your first. If this is the first raid you attempt, I genuinely hope you never play Destiny again. I don't actually mean that in game, but this raid is not for people who just started the game, okay? I understand you want to play the new thing. I understand that. Completely agree with you. But if you're attempting this raid as your first raid, you are fucked. You're not going to have the weapons in order to either stay alive or to do damage properly, unless you got really lucky in your time playing Destiny for 8 hours. You're not going to have the correct super builds. You're not going to understand what weapon surges are. You're not going to understand what fucking heavy ammo finder and scout is going to be doing for your team that will eventually need it. This raid is for when you have a build, you understand most of Destiny mechanics, and you've completed a solid amount of raids under your belt, even if it's just like Last Wish 10 times or something. You never want this to be your first raid. You will never have references to other raids in this raid. Oh, sorry. Ooh, a little gassy there. Anyways. You'll never have anything like Salvation's Edge in the other raids. Now, there are similarities, but this is by far the hardest one to explain if you haven't done other encounters. It's also way easier to do Salvation's Edge once you understand, you know, from Last Wish. Oh, I need to be cleansed if I have this thing. From Vow of the Disciple. Oh, I need to shoot this thing that starts this thing. Stuff like that, you know what I mean? It's just like you get habits from these raids that you will eventually need for Salvation's Edge, and that's like without a doubt, like no questions asked by far. Yeah. So Salvation's Edge first encounter is very complex on paper. It's basically a bunch of rooms that'll rotate, and then you'll have to split into groups, kill tormentors, and someone gets an overload, they have to kill an overload. Again, this is not a guide video, but understand the first encounter up until this point, hands down, is the hardest first encounter out of any raid. And this encounter doesn't even have a boss, technically. I know it's a tormentor, I don't count it as a boss, doesn't have a boss health bar, it is just a tormentor. But it's a great first encounter for the rest of the raid. Second encounter is the first time you're gonna have a boss in this raid. This encounter is very easy to fuck up. You can either get pulled off your plate, and that might even cause a wipe because you won't be able to get the damage. People can accidentally pick up the wrong resonance, which will close the thing wrong, and that'll cause a wipe. People might not be able to get to a plate because there's too many ads there and they didn't clear enough ads. There might be a mini boss that's up and it's killing someone. There might be fucking a blight up and no one saw it. Second encounter can go wrong a lot, and there's multiple different phases, but you can also die to the boss if you're trying to get the reading from the boss as the people who get called. Very difficult, very easy to fuck up. I wouldn't say it's the hardest boss up until this point, but as far as if you've done these other raids, like I do think Rolk is probably harder, but like some of these final bosses are definitely harder. Like Oryx, I'd probably say even is a little bit harder because of the attrition. But yeah, second encounter, definitely pretty difficult. And one thing to note for Salvation's Edge, you will have to learn the mechanic. And what I mean by that is that even if you're doing something as simple as stepping on a plate, it is ideal for you to understand the mechanic like everybody else. This goes for the first first 3 encounters specifically, because the first 3 encounters all have stand on this plate, that charges this plate. Okay, it's being sent back. I need to know when to step back on it. Okay, now I need to collect buffs while I'm also standing on it. You need to be doing this as everyone. Everyone needs to be doing this. I need a bank here. I need to kill this ad. I need to handle an overload. I need to do a tormentor. Everyone needs to understand these mechanics. All 6 of you. Then, the third encounter is essentially... honestly, it's an easier version of the first encounter, in my opinion. You send it back and forth, you get the correct shapes, you close the correct pillar, and then, yeah, that's pretty much it. You do 3 rooms. Fairly simple if you've done other raids before. That's why I recommend doing the other raids before. And then you get to the hardest encounter, I think, in any fucking raid ever. And this is the... I don't even know what it's called. The Shadow Room? Shape Room? I'm not even going to explain this encounter. It is very complicated. Look up a video, watch it 15 times, make sure you get it ingrained into your skull, because this encounter will randomly pick 3 players. Some people are like, if you stand at the beginning, you won't get teleported. No, Timothy, you will get teleported. It's random, you moron. Anyways, yeah. I spent, I think, probably 8 hours in this encounter. I also attempted contest mode for 12 hours on the first encounter. That's probably why I have so much time in the raid. But, yeah, the 4th encounter here, the picture room, shadow room, whatever you want to call it, hardest encounter in Destiny, I think history, my personal opinion. There's just a lot of shit you need to understand, and a lot of shit can go wrong. You do need to pay attention to your fashion for this. You need to understand which hunter is wearing which cloak, essentially, and what ghosts they're wearing. So pay attention to your ghost, pay attention to your hunter's drip, pay attention to other people in your team. This is ideally where you start forming bonds with people from LFG from previous raids. So maybe you found a really good King's Fall team. You guys are like, hey, do you guys want to attempt Salvation's Edge next week? Sure, whatever. Maybe you found a really good Vault of Glass group that all of you guys are new players and you're like, yo, let's try Salvation's Edge next week. This is where you want teams. Salvation's Edge is not LFG solo player friendly. It is very much a... I have a clan that I'm running with this. I have 5 people consistently, and then we get 1 added person from LFG, basically. I don't recommend new players ever doing Salvation's Edge. Give it a couple weeks of Destiny before you even attempt this raid, honestly. I mean that sincerely. It will save you hours and hours of frustration, and it will save everyone else's time in the raid as well. Because everyone at some point needs to pick up their weight in this raid. The 5th and final encounter, I have not completed the encounter. I've gotten to the part where you're about to complete it, though. I will say that. So maybe I bias this. I don't think it's the hardest boss. I do think it's a cool boss. I do think some things are a little too RNG during this encounter. But this is where it's just kind of like, when you're with your group, you understand, oh, okay, yeah, this thing happened. I understand Timothy fucking stood in the buff too long. I understand Timothy got the wrong one. I understand, you know, Billy forgot to get his buff here. I understand he has 3 and he needs cleanse. It takes a lot, like, a lot of this raid is trial, like, 99% of this raid is trial and error, and then 1% is going to be your loadout, but your loadout is still very important. If you wipe at this raid for 24 hours, don't be surprised. I'll be dead serious with you. It's not shameful at all if you're stuck here wiping at this raid constantly. It is by far the hardest raid. If you are an elitist player and you blow through this raid, okay, cool, you can flex it, but at the end of the day, I think most people will take multiple days to finish this raid. Given that most people have lives, like jobs and shit like that. But yeah. Overall, Salvation's Edge, definitely the hardest raid in the game. I recommend no new players ever attempt this as your first raid. Please get a few weeks of Destiny under your belt. I understand you want the gear. The gear is sick. I mean, the armor's kind of mid, I'll be honest, but the gear is fucking amazing. The Euthany raid exotic, fucking amazing as well. Give yourself some time, please, for your sanity and for my sanity, because I'm an LFG player. please, please do not do this as your first raid. Get some experience under Vault of Glass, and if you don't want to do Vault of Glass because it's too old and you don't want to do it, that's fine. Deepstone's Crypt is here, Root of Nightmares is here, even some of the older reprised ones you can do. You know, you have options, I assure you. As a new player, do not feel bad looking up guides. Do not feel bad. Oh shit, what did I just do? Don't feel bad looking up guides. Don't feel bad wiping 10 counters for 3 or 4 hours. This happens. Destiny raiding experience is one of the most unique experiences Destiny will ever have. It is the biggest part of Destiny, in my opinion, as far as concurrent players, because I think if you're still playing Destiny after a couple weeks of launch, it is because of the raids, or because of PvP, but, you know, I don't take PvP seriously. But yeah, at the end of the day, this is my video on ranking all the raids on easiest to hardest, and which raids I think you should be doing first to last. As a new player, LFG solo player, this list, I think it will be golden for you. If you already have a team of people, and people have already done like a mix and match between, like, you know, they've done Vow and they've done Kings, but they've never done Last Wish, and they want you to run through Vow and Kings because they know it better, that's fine. That's worked for you. This isn't like the gold stamp of approval. I just think I should make this list because a lot of new players are new to Destiny. They don't understand raiding experience. They don't understand you need loadouts. You need DPS weapons. You need supers. You need experience under this game to make it efficient for everyone else around you. Especially because Destiny is one of the most unique raiding experiences of all time. So, with all that said, I know it's been an hour and 45 minutes, but that is my video on the Destiny raids, and I hope this list has helped you. If you disagree with anything, or you have some input you want to put here and there, I'm open all ears. If you want to put it in the comment section, like the video if you liked it. And yeah, I'm gonna try to upload more videos, and I thought this would be pretty important for new players. With all that said, thank you for watching.